Edward Turner arrived home and couldn't believe what he heard the housekeeper say on the phone with his little daughter in her arms. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The air conditioning of the BMW X7 hummed softly as Edward observed the frantic movement of Malibu through the darkened windows. At 52 years old, his angular face and neatly trimmed gray beard reflected the iron discipline that had transformed a young civil engineer from the suburbs into one of the most respected businessmen in the high-end residential construction industry in Los Angeles. His hands, always impeccably groomed, drummed nervously on the leather steering wheel as he thought about the meeting he had just canceled. "Mr. Edward, is the meeting with the investors still on for Thursday?" asked Robert, his assistant, through the car's speakerphone. "Confirmed, Robert. I need to sort out some issues at home first," Edward replied, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that made any subordinate accept his decisions without question. 25 years building his empire had taught him that distrust was his best ally. Every contract scrutinized, every partner thoroughly investigated, every employee hired only after rigorous reference checks. It was this obsessive caution that had made Turner Construction synonymous with luxury and exclusivity in the Los Angeles real estate market. However, when it came to his personal life, Edward felt like he was navigating murky waters. The three-story mansion in the hills, with its 1,000 square meters of built area, was the ultimate symbol of his success. An infinity pool overlooking the lagoon, a landscape garden designed by a renowned landscape designer, a climate-controlled wine cellar, and a home theater that accommodated 20 people, everything meticulously planned to impress. But behind the perfect facade, Edward carried a dilemma that silently gnawed at him. Do they really love me, or is it just the money? This question echoed in his mind every night when he locked himself in his wood-paneled office to review contracts he already knew by heart. Victoria, his wife of 18 years, was an elegant 45-year-old woman, always impeccably dressed with her blonde hairstyle at the best salon in Beverly Hills. The daughter of a traditional family from Beverly Hills, she had brought not only her natural beauty to the marriage, but also the social codes of the elite that Edward was still learning to navigate. Her mornings were dedicated to Pilates at the club, afternoons with friends at charity luncheons, and evenings strumming the guitar on the porch, performing soft pop songs with a sweet voice that still made Edward stop what he was doing to listen. Peter, their 16-year-old firstborn, was a young version of himself, determined, intelligent, but with the typical teenage rebellion that left Edward bewildered. The boy split his time between tennis practice at the local tennis club and online gaming with friends, always trying to catch his father's attention with academic or athletic achievements. "Dad, I got the highest grade in physics in my class," Peter had announced the previous week during dinner. "Very good, son. Keep it up," was all Edward managed to respond, without lifting his eyes from the reports he was reviewing while eating. Clara, 14, was his opposite, sensitive, artistic, and with a keen intuition that often made Edward uncomfortable. The girl had a habit of watching him with those green eyes like her mother's, as if she could see through his carefully constructed defenses. Parking the BMW in the mansion's garage, Edward took a deep breath. The familiar jasmine scent from the garden mixed with the smell of carnauba wax that the cleaning crew used on the marble in the entrance hall. Everything was always perfect, thanks to the meticulous work of the domestic staff led by Mrs. Johnson, a 60-year-old woman who had worked for the family for over a decade. But 3 months prior, a new addition had arrived in the household routine. Sarah, a 28-year-old woman from rural Pennsylvania, had been hired to assist with general household duties and, primarily, to help with the children's activities when necessary. "She has good references and seems like a serious person," Victoria had commented at the time of hiring, showing Edward the simple but well-organized resume of the new employee. Sarah had a discreet but striking presence. Her curly hair always tied in a simple bun, brown skin, and brown eyes that conveyed a serenity that contrasted with the frantic energy that usually dominated the house. She spoke little, worked hard, and always carried with her a faded crochet bag, a keepsake from her grandmother. What Edward didn't know was that, 3 times a week, Sarah brought with her to work a small 2-year-old girl named Lily. The child stayed discreetly in the maid's room or the service area, being cared for with all the love in the world while Sarah carried out her domestic tasks. "She's my niece," Sarah explained to Mrs. Johnson when asked. Her mother works during the day and has no one to leave her with. It's just until we can get her into daycare. Mrs. Johnson, who had a soft spot for children, not only allowed it, but also began to help care for little Lily, a girl with fair skin, honey-colored curly hair, and bright green eyes that drew attention for their liveliness. That March afternoon, with the sun still strong at 3 o'clock, Edward decided he needed a moment for himself before facing another night of reports and spreadsheets. He headed to the covered porch, where he usually had his coffee, and watched the sailboats on the lagoon. The sound of the wind in the leaves of the palm trees strategically planted in the garden always calmed him. It was then that he heard voices coming from the area near the sunroom. A female voice was speaking softly on the phone, but the wind brought the words clearly to him. He heard her voice. It was Sarah. Edward approached quietly, positioning himself behind the frosted glass door that separated the balcony from the service area. What he saw made him stop completely. Sarah was slowly walking through the small herb garden that Victoria had created, cradling a little girl in her arms while talking on the phone. The scene was filled with a tenderness that Edward hadn't witnessed in years. Sarah was softly humming a lullaby he vaguely remembered from his childhood, while little Lily played absent-mindedly with a colorful string. "Don't worry, my dear, she's safe here," Sarah said on the phone, lovingly adjusting the girl's curls. "They have no idea, but this little girl has the same father as their children." Edward's world stopped. The words echoed in his mind as if spoken in an empty cathedral. His knees weakened, and he had to lean against the doorframe to avoid staggering. The sound of birds in the garden seemed muffled, as if he were submerged. The same father as their children. The phrase repeated in his head as he watched the girl in Sarah's arms. The honey-colored curls, the green eyes, the shape of her face. How had he not noticed before? A wave of confused memories began to form in his mind. 3 years ago, a law office in downtown Los Angeles. A complicated negotiation over land. A polite young receptionist who had offered him coffee while he waited for the lawyer. Edward closed his eyes, trying to reorganize the fragments of memory that emerged like pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle. His breathing was uneven, and he could feel cold sweat trickling down his forehead. When he opened his eyes again, Sarah had already ended the call and was playing with Lily, showing her the flowers in the garden and patiently naming each one. "Look, my love, this one is basil. Smell how nice it is," Sarah murmured, holding a leaf close to the girl's nose, who let out a crystal-clear giggle. Edward remained motionless, watching the scene with a mix of shock, disbelief, and something he couldn't name, but which began to grow in his chest like a plant in fertile soil. Edward stayed hidden behind the glass door for another 10 minutes, observing every gesture of Sarah with Lily, as if he were watching a movie in slow motion. The girl babbled random words while playing with mint leaves, and every sound that came from her little mouth seemed to echo directly in his chest. When he finally managed to move, his legs trembled so much that he had to hold onto the staircase railing. "Good afternoon, Mr. Edward." Mrs. Johnson's cheerful voice startled him. "I thought you wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Would you like me to prepare your afternoon coffee?" No, thank you, Mrs. Johnson," Edward stammered, trying to regain his composure. "I just came to grab some papers. I'm heading up to the office." Mrs. Johnson watched him with that maternal look he knew so well. "Is everything okay, doctor? You look a bit pale." "I'm fine, just tired from the trip," Edward lied, quickly climbing the marble steps to the second floor. Once locked in his office, Edward collapsed into the leather chair behind the mahogany desk. His hands trembled as he opened his laptop and tried to focus on the emails piling up. But the words on the screen danced without making sense. "This little girl has the same father as their children." The phrase hammered in his head like a disturbing mantra. He slammed the laptop shut and walked to the window overlooking the garden. Down below, he could see Sarah hanging clothes on the makeshift line in the service area, while Lily slept in a small portable crib under the shade of a tree. The scene was so natural, so everyday, that for a moment Edward wondered if he had imagined it all. But he hadn't imagined it. Those green eyes were unmistakable. The shape of the nose, the curve of the lips when the girl smiled. It was like looking at Clara as a baby, or at Peter when he was 2 years old. "My God," Edward murmured, running his hands over his face. How did this happen? The memories began to slowly organize themselves. March 2022. He was negotiating the purchase of land in a suburban area of Los Angeles with many legal complications. The Andrade and Associates law firm had been hired to resolve the bureaucratic issues. For several weeks, Edward frequented that office in downtown Los Angeles. The receptionist was discreet, efficient. Her hair was always tied back, her clothes simple yet well-kept, a shy smile greeting him every morning. "Good morning, Mr. Edward. Dr. Andrade has arrived. Can I offer you a coffee while you wait?" Edward vaguely remembered some casual conversations. She was studying at night, pursuing a degree in business administration. She spoke with a northern accent, mentioning that she had recently arrived in Los Angeles. She was polite, intelligent, different from the women in his social circle. And then, on a rainy Thursday, when the negotiation had finally been concluded, Edward left the office in a state of euphoria. The land in the suburban area represented a golden opportunity. Its location would allow for the construction of a project that would elevate Turner Construction to new heights. "Sarah," he remembered saying, stopping at the reception, "would you like to grab a drink with me to celebrate? Without you organizing all the paperwork and keeping me informed about Dr. Andrade's schedule, this negotiation would have taken twice as long." She had blushed, looking around as if someone might be listening. I don't know, Mr. Edward. I don't think it would be appropriate." "Nonsense," Edward insisted, with that confidence that wealth and success had given him. "Just a professional thank you. I know a discreet restaurant in Santa Monica." What happened that night remained hazy in Edward's memory. He remembered the restaurant, the conversations, discovering that Sarah was more cultured and interesting than she appeared. He remembered drinking more than he had planned. In the modest apartment in a suburban area, Edward Turner should have offered her a ride. He violently shook his head, as if he could expel the memories. He didn't want to remember. For 3 years, he had managed to bury that night in a dark compartment of his mind, treating it as a momentary slip of a successful man under pressure. But now, watching Lily in the garden, every detail returned with cruel clarity. The date matched perfectly. The girl was 2 years old, born exactly 9 months after that encounter. A noise in the hallway pulled him away from the window. Familiar voices echoed through the house. Victoria had returned from the gym, and Peter was back from school. The normal life of the Turner family continued, while Edward felt as if he were watching everything through an aquarium. "Edward," Victoria's voice called from downstairs. "You're home early today." "I'm in the office," he replied, trying to make his voice sound normal. During dinner that night, Edward barely touched his food. Sitting at the head of the mahogany table that accommodated 12 people, he watched his family as if seeing them for the first time. Victoria, elegant in a white linen outfit, animatedly spoke about the preparations for a charity event she was organizing. Peter devoured the grilled salmon while recounting his tennis practice. Clara absent-mindedly poked at her salad while reading something on her phone. "Dad, are you okay?" Clara suddenly asked, looking up. "You haven't said a word since we sat down." "Just a tiring day, sweetheart," Edward replied, forcing a smile. Victoria studied him closely. 18 years of marriage had taught her to read her husband's expressions. "Did something happen with the business? You seem different." "Nothing major. Just some contracts that need special attention." Later, lying in the king-size bed of the master bedroom, Edward pretended to sleep while Victoria read a novel beside him. His mind was in turmoil. Throughout the afternoon, he had discreetly observed Sarah's movements around the house. She worked with the same efficiency as always, but now Edward noticed details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way she tended to the garden plants with the same care she gave to Lily. How she always carried homemade cookies in her bag to share with the girl during snack breaks. The way she hummed lullabies while cleaning, always keeping an eye on her daughter playing nearby. "She is protecting our daughter," Edward thought, and immediately startled at the possessive pronoun he had mentally used. "My daughter." In the days that followed, Edward developed an obsessive routine. He arrived home earlier, made up excuses to work in the home office, and watched every movement of Sarah and Lily through the window. He discovered that Sarah always brought the girl on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, the days when, apparently, she had no one else to leave her with. One afternoon, pretending to review landscaping projects, Edward went down to the garden when he knew Sarah would be there. He found her sitting on the grass, playing with Lily near the rose garden. "Good afternoon, Sarah," he said, trying to sound casual. She jumped, quickly standing up and picking Lily up in her arms. "Good afternoon, Mr. Edward." I'm sorry, the little girl wanted to see the flowers. No need to apologize, Edward replied, watching Lily, who was looking at him with curiosity. Is she your daughter? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah held Lily tightly against her chest, her eyes filling with tears she tried to hold back. She's my niece, Mr. Edward. I only take care of her when her mother can't. The lie hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Edward knew she was lying, and Sarah knew he knew. But neither was ready to break the veil of pretense that kept the situation controlled. She's a very beautiful girl, Edward said softly, reaching out to touch Lily's little arm. The girl didn't flinch. Instead, she held his finger with her tiny hand and smiled, revealing pearly white teeth. Edward's heart melted completely. At that moment, looking into Lily's green eyes, he felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if an invisible thread had formed between them, uniting the past, present, and a future he still didn't know how to navigate. I need to go, Mr. Edward, Sarah murmured, clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Johnson will be arriving, and I still have to finish cleaning the living room. Of course, Edward replied, but he couldn't take his eyes off Lily, who was still holding his finger and babbling something incomprehensible that sounded like music to his ears. As he walked back to the house, Edward knew he had reached a point of no return. The truth had been revealed, even if not through words. Now he needed to decide what to do with it. In the solitude of his office that night, Edward opened a bottle of 20-year-old Scotch whiskey and poured a generous glass. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to feel fear. Fear of what this revelation meant for his family, his marriage, his carefully constructed reputation. But above all, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. The urgency to protect someone not out of obligation or convenience, but out of true love. The month of April brought with it an unease that enveloped the Turner mansion like a silent fog. Edward had developed the habit of working more often from home, creating elaborate excuses about the need to review projects in a quieter environment. In reality, each early return home was an opportunity to observe Sarah and Lily, to try to understand the dynamics unfolding right under his nose. You're different, Edward, Victoria commented one Friday morning as they had coffee on the porch. She looked impeccable as always, wearing a navy blue linen outfit that accentuated her light eyes, but her expression carried a worry she couldn't disguise. You've been far away, more than usual. Edward almost choked on his coffee. Far away how? You come home in the middle of the afternoon, spend hours staring out the office window, and when we talk, it feels like your mind is elsewhere, Victoria enumerated, nervously fiddling with the handle of her porcelain cup. Just yesterday, Peter asked you about the school parents' meeting 3 times before you responded. It's just some complicated business, love. Nothing to worry about, Edward lied, pretending to flip through the Los Angeles Times. But Victoria Turner was not a woman easily deceived. The daughter of a traditional family from Beverly Hills, she had learned early on to observe the details, to read between the lines. Her refined education included not only good manners and general knowledge, but also a keen intuition for detecting when something was out of place in her carefully organized world. Edward, she said, placing her hand over his. We've been married for 18 years. I know when you're worried about business and when it's something else. This is something else. At that moment, Sarah appeared on the porch carrying a tray of fresh fruit and a pitcher of passion fruit juice. As always, she was dressed simply, clean jeans and a white cotton blouse, but Edward noticed that Victoria was watching her with an attention she hadn't shown before. Good morning, Mr. Edward, Mrs. Victoria, Sarah greeted with her soft voice, placing the tray on the side table. Good morning, Sarah, Victoria replied, not taking her eyes off the young woman. Your niece didn't come today? Sarah hesitated for a fraction of a second. No, ma'am. Her mother got the day off from work. That's nice. Victoria smiled, but Edward sensed something calculating in that smile. She's a very pretty girl. How old is she again? 2 years old, Mrs. Victoria. 2 years, what a lovely age. And how often does she stay with you? Edward felt his blood run cold. Victoria's questions were not casual. They were an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Sometimes, when needed, Sarah replied, visibly uncomfortable. Excuse me, I need to check the washing machine. As Sarah walked away, Victoria turned to Edward with a look he knew well. the same one she used when questioning the children's excessive spending or when she suspected someone was trying to take advantage of the family. Interesting, she murmured. What's interesting? A 2-year-old who sometimes stays with her aunt. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, to be more precise. Edward's heart raced. How do you know that? Because I pay attention to what happens in my house, Edward. And lately, I've been paying attention to you too. That afternoon, while Edward tried to focus on a video conference with Japanese investors, Peter barged into his office without knocking, a habit that irritated Edward deeply, but one the boy insisted on maintaining as a form of provocation. Dad, have you seen my tennis racket? Peter asked, rummaging through the shelves behind the desk. Peter, I'm in a meeting, Edward whispered, covering the microphone. Just a second, Peter replied, continuing his search. It was then that he stopped, looking out the window. Hey, does Sarah have a daughter? Edward almost dropped his laptop. What? Out in the garden. She's playing with a little girl. I thought she wasn't married. Edward quickly apologized to the Japanese investors, ended the video call, and rushed to the window. In the garden, Sarah was sitting on the grass, playing hide-and-seek behind the trees with Lily, who giggled every time her mother appeared from behind the trunks. That's her niece, Edward said, trying to sound casual. Peter, at 16 and with the typical insight of a teenager, frowned. Niece? Dad, they look just alike. Same nose, same way of smiling. And look at the girl's eyes. They're green like Chloe's. Edward felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. If even Peter, absorbed in his own teenage interests, had noticed the resemblance, how long would it take for others to notice too? Peter, are you sure you lost your racket? Maybe it's in your room. Dad, why are you changing the subject? Peter stared at him with that determination Edward recognized in himself. And why are you so nervous? It's just a question about the employee. I'm not nervous. I just want you to find your racket and go practice. Peter continued watching the garden. You know what, Dad? You've been acting really strange lately. You come home early, stare out the window, and now you're all paranoid over a question about a child. Not paranoid, Peter. And I'm not acting strange. You are. Chloe noticed too. Just yesterday, she asked me if you were having problems at work because you barely spoke during dinner. The mention of Chloe reminded Edward of their daughter's keen intuition. If she had started to notice changes in his behavior, it was only a matter of time before she began to ask more pointed questions. Peter, find your racket and let's drop this subject. Okay, Dad, but only because I really want to practice, Peter said, heading for the door. Before leaving, he stopped and turned around. But that girl down there really looks like us. Especially you when you were little. I saw the pictures in the living room. After Peter left, Edward needed to sit down. The walls of the office seemed to be closing in around him. The situation was becoming unsustainable. It wasn't just his own heavy conscience. Now the whole family was starting to notice inconsistencies. 2 weeks later, during a Sunday lunch on the porch, Chloe asked the question Edward feared the most. Mom, who is that little girl that Sarah sometimes brings? Victoria paused with her fork in the air, her eyes meeting Edward's for a fraction of a second before turning to their daughter. It's her niece, Chloe. What? I don't know. It's just that she looks so much like us when we were little. Especially me, Chloe said innocently, unaware of the bombshell she had just dropped. Peter thought so too. He even mentioned it yesterday. You two were watching the child? Victoria asked, and Edward detected a dangerous tone in her voice. It's not watching, Mom. She sometimes plays in the garden, and when we walk by, it's hard not to notice, Peter explained. And let's be honest, she's really cute. She has these bright green eyes that sparkle when she smiles. Green eyes, Victoria repeated, looking directly at Edward. Like ours, Chloe chimed in cheerfully. It must be a coincidence, right? Especially since she's not even related to Sarah. Edward swallowed hard. What do you mean she's not related by blood? Well, Dad, Sarah has brown eyes and a darker complexion. The girl is fair and has green eyes. Obviously, they aren't direct relatives, Chloe explained with the relentless logic of a 14-year-old. The silence that followed was deafening. Edward could practically hear the gears turning in Victoria's head, connecting dots he had hoped would remain forever separate. Edward, Victoria finally said, her voice too controlled to be natural. Could you accompany me to the kitchen? I need to talk to you about the menu for the week. Edward knew it wasn't about any menu. He followed Victoria to the spacious gourmet kitchen, with its black granite countertops and imported stainless steel appliances. She closed the glass door that separated the kitchen from the social area and turned to him. "Edward Turner," she said, and the use of his full name made Edward realize he was in trouble. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer. Do you know this child?" "Victoria, it's a simple question, Edward. Yes or no. Do you know the girl that Sarah brings?" Edward looked into the eyes of the woman he had been married to for nearly 2 decades. He could lie, create an elaborate story, use his negotiation skills to change the subject. But something in Victoria's expression, a mix of determination and fear, made him realize that lying would only delay the inevitable. "I think I do," he finally said. Victoria closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they were filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You think? How does someone think they know a 2-year-old child?" "Victoria, it's complicated." "No, Edward. Complicated is discovering that my husband is acting strangely, that there's a mysterious child frequenting my home, and that this child has green eyes just like my family." Her voice was starting to tremble. "Complicated is realizing that my own children noticed similarities that I was trying to ignore." Edward leaned against the kitchen counter. The moment of truth had arrived, whether he wanted it to or not. "Victoria, I need to tell you something. But first, I want you to know that I love you and our family more than anything in the world." "Oh my God," Victoria whispered, bringing her hands to her face. "Oh my God, Edward. No." The weight of 18 years of marriage, of a life built together, of children raised side by side, hung between them like a heavy cloud. Edward knew that what he said next would change everything forever. And in the garden, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the house, Lily played peacefully in the shade of the mango tree, while Sarah hummed a lullaby, protecting her daughter in the only way she knew, by keeping the secret that was about to be revealed. The kitchen of the Turner mansion, with its black granite countertops and state-of-the-art appliances, had turned into a silent battlefield. Victoria stood motionless by the central island, her white-knuckled fingers gripping the edge of the stone as if it were an anchor in the midst of a storm. Edward, leaning against the opposite counter, felt the weight of 18 years of marriage crashing down on his shoulders like an avalanche. "Say it," Victoria whispered, her voice cutting through the softly humming air conditioning. "Just say it, Edward." Edward closed his eyes, taking a deep breath of the lavender scent from the fabric softener that Sarah used on the table linens, a smell that now carried completely different meanings. 3 years ago, during that negotiation downtown, he began, each word coming out as if it were being pulled from his throat with pliers. Sarah worked at the lawyer's office. She was the receptionist. Victoria said nothing, but Edward saw her hands tremble. "When we closed the deal, I invited her to dinner. It was supposed to be just a professional thank you, but what, Edward?" Victoria's voice was dangerously calm. "But we drank too much. We talked about life, about dreams. She told me about the struggles of living alone in the city, about how she was fighting to study at night. And I felt connected to someone in a way I hadn't felt in years." "Connected?" Victoria repeated the word as if it were poison. "You slept with her." "It was one night. Just one night. The next day, the deal was done, and I never saw her again. Until she showed up at our house as a housekeeper." Victoria finished the sentence, her voice now laced with a cold anger that Edward had never heard before. "Did you know who she was when I hired her?" "No. I swear I didn't know. When you showed me her resume, the last name was different. The photos, too. Only when she started working here did I." "Did you what?" "Did I start to suspect? But I was afraid I was imagining things." Victoria began to pace the kitchen, her high-heeled sandals clicking on the porcelain floor like an out-of-sync metronome. 3 months, Edward. 3 months this woman worked in our home, cared for our children, ate at our table, and you stayed silent." "I wasn't sure." "Sure." Victoria exploded, her composure shattering, finally breaking the silence. "Do you need proof to see that child has your eyes? Your nose? The same smile as Chloe when she was a baby." Outside, the sound of the lawnmower stopped abruptly. John, the gardener, had noticed the raised voices coming from the kitchen. "Victoria, please lower your voice," Edward whispered. "Don't ask me to lower my voice in my own house," she shouted. 18 years, Edward. 18 years of marriage, and you make a fool of me." The kitchen door opened discreetly, and Sarah appeared with a basket of clean laundry. She paused at the threshold, sensing the tension in the air. "Excuse me," she murmured, trying to retreat. "No," Victoria said firmly. "Come in, Sarah. I think it's time we had a talk." Sarah entered slowly, placing the basket on the floor. Edward could see her hands trembling, and for a moment he wondered how many times she had mentally rehearsed this moment. "Sit down," Victoria indicated one of the stools at the kitchen island. Sarah obeyed, keeping her eyes downcast. She was wearing a light pink blouse that highlighted her brown skin, and Edward noticed for the first time how beautiful she was, a natural and understated beauty that contrasted sharply with Victoria's studied elegance. "How old is your niece, Sarah?" Victoria asked, crossing her arms. 2 years old, Mrs. Johnson." "And when was she born, exactly?" The silence stretched for seconds that felt like hours. Sarah lifted her eyes for the first time, looking directly at Edward. "December 15th, 2022, she said softly. Edward quickly calculated. 9 months and a few days after that night in March 2022. "And who is her father?" Victoria continued her interrogation. Tears began to stream down Sarah's face. "Mrs. Johnson. Who is her father, Sarah?" Sarah looked at Edward again, a silent plea in her eyes. She was clearly torn between the need to protect her job and the impossibility of continuing to lie. "He's in this room," she finally whispered. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic in Malibu. Victoria leaned against the counter as if her legs were about to give way. "Why?" Victoria asked, and Edward wasn't sure if the question was directed at him or Sarah. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Because I was afraid, Mrs. Johnson. Afraid that you would think I came to work here out of interest. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid that they would take my daughter away from me." "Your daughter?" Victoria repeated. "So she is not your niece?" "No, ma'am. She is my daughter. And you brought her into our home. I had no choice." Sarah stood up from the stool, her passivity giving way to fierce determination. "I couldn't leave her alone. I have no family here in Los Angeles. I can't afford a babysitter. The only person who could care for her is me. So why didn't you tell the truth from the beginning? And would you have hired me if you knew?" Sarah challenged. "A single mother, with a small child, who had a relationship with your husband? Would you trust me in your home, around your children?" Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. The truth was cruel. No, she would not have hired Sarah if she had known the whole story. Edward, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. "Sarah, why didn't you ever come to me? Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy?" Sarah turned to him, her brown eyes shining with tears and anger. "Come to you? You are Edward Turner, owner of Turner Construction. You live in a mansion in Malibu, have a family, a reputation. And what was I? A receptionist from a modest apartment in a suburban area who could barely pay rent. But I had the right to know." "Right?" Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't even remember my name when I started working here. You looked at me on the first day as if you were trying to remember where you had seen me before." Edward felt as if he had been slapped. It was true. When Victoria had introduced him to the new employee, he had had the vague sensation of knowing her, but he hadn't bothered to investigate. "I wanted to tell," Sarah continued, her voice rising. "Since I set foot in this house, I wanted to tell. But every day that passed made it harder. How could I say, 'Oh, Mrs. Johnson, remember your new employee? Well, her daughter is half-sister to your children?'" "You could have," Victoria began. "I could have what?" Sarah interrupted. "Do you know my story, Mrs. Johnson? I came from a small town in the Midwest with a suitcase and $500 in my pocket. I worked all kinds of jobs: cashier, cleaner, waitress. When I got the job at the office, it was the first time I had a decent salary. And when I found out I was pregnant, I had 2 options: go home with nothing or stay here and fight alone." "You chose to stay," Edward observed. "I chose to stay because I wanted to give my daughter what I never had: opportunity. And when I saw that you were looking for help, I thought it was a sign from God." "A sign from God?" Victoria asked, incredulity in her voice. "For my daughter to meet her father. For her to grow up in an environment where she could have education, culture, opportunities. Even if it was from a distance, even if she never knew the truth." Victoria walked to the kitchen window, which overlooked the garden. Outside, Lily was sitting on the grass, playing with a set of toy pots and pans that Edward didn't remember seeing before. "She is beautiful," Victoria said softly. "Yes," Sarah agreed, her voice heavy with maternal pride. "She is the most important thing in my life." Edward approached the window and stood beside Victoria. They watched in silence as Lily cooked something. Victoria was lost in her playtime, talking to herself in her 2-year-old language. "She has your eyes," Victoria said to Edward, no longer angry, just filled with deep sadness. "And your smile when you were a baby." "I know. And I was blind for 3 months." "You weren't blind. You had no reason to suspect. Or maybe I didn't want to see," Victoria murmured. Sarah approached cautiously. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand if you want me to leave. I just ask." "Ask what?" "That you let me say goodbye to her properly. That I can explain, when she's older, that it wasn't because I wanted to abandon her here." Victoria turned to Sarah, studying her face for a long moment. "How old are you, Sarah?" 28, Mrs. Johnson. "And Lily's parents? Does she have other relatives?" "Just me. My parents died when I was a teenager. I have no siblings." "Her father?" She glanced at Edward. "Well, you know the story." Victoria looked back out the window. Lily had abandoned her toys and was now chasing a blue butterfly that was fluttering low over the lawn. "Edward," she finally said. "Leave." "Victoria, leave," she shouted. "I need to talk to Sarah. Alone." Edward hesitated for a moment, looking at Sarah, who kept her eyes on the ground. "If you need me, I'll be in the office," he said, heading for the door. "Edward," Victoria called as he was almost out. "You will take the DNA test." It wasn't a question. It was an order. "Of course," he replied, and left the kitchen, leaving the two women alone for a conversation that he knew would determine their future. As he climbed the stairs to his office, Edward could hear low voices coming from the kitchen. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was less hostile now, more collaborative. In his office, he sat by the window and watched Lily in the garden. The girl had found a garden hose and was trying to water it herself, soaking herself more than the plants. For the first time in 3 months, Edward allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if Lily were truly his daughter. Not just biologically, but officially. What it would be like to teach her to ride a bike, help her with homework, be present at her school performances. And then he wondered if it was too late for all those possibilities. The 2 weeks that followed the revelation in the kitchen were the most tense that the Turner mansion had ever witnessed. Edward walked through the house like a ghost, trying to maintain normalcy in front of Peter and Chloe, while Victoria had adopted a cold courtesy that was worse than any shout. Sarah continued to work, but now there was a rigidity in her movements, as if she were permanently preparing to receive the news of her dismissal. The DNA test had been done at a discreet clinic in Santa Monica, away from the curious eyes of Malibu. Edward remembered every detail of that Tuesday morning. The small but well-organized office, the smell of disinfectant, the disconcerting ease of collecting the samples. Lily had cried when the nurse collected her saliva, and Edward felt a pang in his chest seeing her scared. "All set, Mr. Edward," said Dr. Smith, a bald man in his 50s who had promised absolute discretion. "In a week, we will have the results. The lab will contact you directly." "And about confidentiality," Edward began. "Absolute. I've been working with this type of case for 15 years. You can rest assured." During that week of waiting, the household routine became a carefully orchestrated theater. Peter and Chloe noticed the tension but attributed it all to the complicated business their father claimed to be facing. "Dad, you look like you've lost money in the stock market," Peter commented during an especially quiet lunch. "Everything okay?" "Everything's great, son," Edward lied, mechanically cutting the filet mignon with mushroom sauce that Sarah had prepared. Chloe, with her keen sensitivity, picked up on the nuances that Peter overlooked. "Mom, did you and Dad fight?" she asked one afternoon while Victoria tried to concentrate on a book on the porch. "Why do you think that, sweetheart? You barely look at each other. And when you do, it seems like you're only talking with your eyes, you know. Like when you fought over your 40th birthday party." Victoria closed the book and pulled Chloe to sit beside her on the wicker sofa. "Sometimes adults go through tough phases, sweetheart. It's nothing you need to worry about. But you guys aren't going to separate, right?" Chloe asked, and the vulnerability in her voice broke Victoria's heart. "No, sweetheart. We're not going to separate. But even as she said that, Victoria wasn't sure it was true. The call came on a rainy Thursday in May. Edward was in his office, pretending to review business proposals, when his cell phone rang. "Mr. Edward? This is Dr. Smith. The results are ready." Edward felt his mouth dry. "And, would you like to come to the clinic, or would you prefer I inform you over the phone?" "Over the phone, please." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Edward, the result is positive. 99.97% probability of paternity. The child is your daughter." Edward closed his eyes. Even knowing in the depths of his heart what the result would be, hearing the official confirmation felt like a punch in the stomach. "Thank you, doctor. Do you need anything else?" "Copies of the report." "Yes, please. Can you send them by mail?" "Of course. I will personally take care of the shipping." Edward hung up the phone and stood still for several minutes, looking out the window. In the garden, Sarah was teaching Lily to recognize the colors of the flowers. "Red," she said, pointing to a rose. "Red. Me," Lily repeated, clapping her hands. "That's it. Very good, my love. And this one? What color is this?" "Me." Sarah laughed, a crystalline sound that floated up to Edward's office. "No, this is yellow. Why yellow? W." Edward observed the scene for a few more minutes, trying to fully absorb the reality. That girl playing in the garden was his daughter. His real daughter, with his DNA, his features, his responsibility. He descended the stairs with heavy steps. He found Victoria in the living room, arranging flowers in a crystal vase, a task she always did when she was nervous. "You're back," he said simply. Victoria paused with a white lily stem in her hand. "And positive. 99.97%. Victoria placed the flower back in the vase and sat down on the sofa. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. "So that's it," she finally murmured. "Victoria, No." She raised her hand. "Don't say anything right now. I need to process this." Edward sat in the armchair across from the sofa, keeping his distance. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know, Edward. Honestly, I don't know." "And about Sarah? What about her? Are you going to fire her?" Victoria looked at him as if he had suggested something absurd. "Fire her? Why?" Because this must be awkward for you. Having her here, working in our house, being constantly reminded of what, Edward? Your betrayal." The word hung in the air like a bomb that had yet to explode. "It wasn't exactly a betrayal, Victoria. We weren't going through a good time back then, and we weren't going through a good time." Victoria stood up, her voice rising. "So the solution was to sleep with another woman? You were distant, focused only on Clara's problems at school, on Peter who was causing trouble. I was being a mother, Edward. I was taking care of our children while you were traveling 15 days a month." Edward knew she was right, but the need to defend himself spoke louder. "And I was building the empire that supports our family. That pays for the boys' private school, their Pilates classes, the trips abroad. Do you think I married you for the money?" Victoria asked, and there was a deep pain in her voice. "No, nothing, Edward. I married you because I loved you, because I believed we would build a life together. And for 18 years, I was a devoted wife, a present mother, a partner in your business. You are. And at the first sign of trouble in our marriage, you ran into the arms of another woman." Edward had no answer for that. The truth was that, at that time, he felt disconnected from Victoria, overwhelmed with business, and Sarah's attention had been like a balm for his wounded ego. "And now?" Victoria asked. "What do we do now, Edward?" Before Edward could respond, Peter appeared in the room, still wearing his school uniform. "Hey, Dad. Hey, Mom. Did you see where Sarah put my soccer cleats? I have practice soon." "They should be in the laundry room," Victoria replied, trying to sound normal. "Thanks." Peter started to leave, but stopped. "Oh, and her daughter is in the garden again. Man, that girl is so cute. Can I play with her?" Edward and Victoria exchanged glances. "Peter," Edward said carefully, "what do you think of the girl? Lily? She's a sweetheart. Super smart for her age. Just today she was showing me the flowers she knows the names of. And she likes soccer. When she saw my ball, she started clapping." "Did you talk to her?" Victoria asked. "Of course. Talk is a way to say it, right? Because she still talks kind of babyish. But we understand each other." Peter smiled. "Why are you guys asking this?" Curiosity, Edward lied. All right. Well, I'm going to get my cleats. But when Peter left, Edward and Victoria were once again alone with the weight of the situation. He likes her, Victoria observed. Yes. And Clara does too. Yesterday I saw her teaching Lily how to make a paper doll. They don't know. No. But what if they find out? Do you think we should tell them? Victoria stood up and walked to the window overlooking the garden. Sarah was now sitting on the grass with Lily in her lap, reading a children's book. The scene was so natural, so full of love, that for a moment Victoria forgot all the complications of the situation. Edward, she said without turning around. Can I ask you a question? Sure. Do you feel anything for her? For Sarah? The question caught Edward off guard. What do you mean? It's a simple question. Do you have feelings for her? Edward thought carefully before answering. No. What happened 3 years ago was a moment. A mistake, perhaps. But it didn't have to do with deep feelings. And for Lily? Edward swallowed hard. That's a more complicated question to answer. Try. Since I found out, yes. I feel something for her. I can't exactly explain what, but when I see her playing in the garden, when she smiles, I feel a connection I didn't expect. It's because she's your daughter. Yes, I think that's it. Victoria turned to him. Edward, I'm going to be very clear with you. This marriage is hanging by a thread. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not hurt, betrayed, confused. But that child out there is innocent. She didn't ask to be born, didn't ask to be in this complicated situation. And if she really is your daughter. Victoria paused, taking a deep breath. If she really is your daughter, then she is also our responsibility. Edward looked at her, trying to understand where she was going with this. Our responsibility? I won't allow a child to suffer because of the mistakes of adults. If you have a daughter, Edward, then she deserves to have a present father. And if she's going to have a present father, then I will have to learn to deal with that. Victoria, don't thank me yet. That doesn't mean everything is forgiven and forgotten. It just means that I won't penalize a child for your mistakes. At that moment, Clara appeared in the room, still wearing her school uniform. Mom, can I ask a weird question? Sure, sweetheart. Does Lily she looks like? Do you know any babies? Edward felt his blood run cold. Victoria remained calm. Why are you asking that, Chloe? Because today at school we were looking at pictures from when we were babies, and I brought those pictures of yours that are in the album in the living room. And I swear, Mom, that Lily looks just like baby Peter. A lot. Edward and Victoria exchanged glances again. Chloe, Victoria said carefully, how about we sit down to talk? You and Peter. There are some things we need to explain to you. About Lily? About a lot of things. Chloe sat on the sofa between her parents, her teenage intuition already preparing her for an important revelation. Mom, are you going to tell me that she is our sister? The silence that followed was answer enough. Oh my God, Chloe whispered. I was right. And so, on a rainy afternoon in May, the first bricks of the Turner family's wall of secrets began to crumble, paving the way for truths that would change everyone's lives forever. The living room of the Turner mansion had never witnessed a moment so charged with tension and expectation. Chloe remained seated on the sofa, her green eyes, so similar to Lily's, alternating between her parents' faces as she processed the confirmation of her suspicions. Edward felt his palms sweat, and Victoria maintained an upright posture, as if preparing for battle. Peter, Victoria called, her voice echoing through the house. Can you come here to the living room, please? I'm coming, Mom. Just changing my clothes. The response came from the second floor. During the minutes of waiting, Chloe kept her eyes on her father. His expression was a mix of curiosity, surprise, and something Edward couldn't quite identify, perhaps disappointment. Dad, she said softly, how did this happen? Chloe, let's wait for your brother to arrive so we can talk together. Victoria intervened, placing her hand on her daughter's knee. But I already understand, Mom. Lily is Dad's daughter, right? Edward closed his eyes for a moment. Chloe's insight always surprised him, but in this case, he wished she were less observant. Peter came down the stairs wearing shorts and a t-shirt from the local tennis club, still barefoot. He stopped at the entrance of the living room when he sensed the heavy atmosphere. Whoa, what's with the funeral vibe? Did someone die? Sit here, son, Edward said, gesturing to the armchair next to the sofa. Wow, Dad, what's with the formality? I'm scared, Peter joked, but Edward noticed the genuine concern in his voice. Peter, Victoria began, taking control of the situation. Do you remember when you asked about Sarah's daughter? Lily? Of course. Why wait? Peter looked at Chloe, who was visibly nervous. What does Chloe know that I don't? Peter, Edward intervened. There are some things about our family that you both need to know. Things that will change our dynamic a bit. Dynamic? Peter frowned. Dad, you're talking like one of those internet coaches. Just say what it is. Chloe spoke up. Peter, Lily is our sister. Peter blinked several times, as if trying to focus on a blurry image. What do you mean, sister? Blood sister. Dad's daughter. Chloe explained, her voice firm yet gentle. Peter fell silent for long seconds, looking from one parent to the other. Then, slowly, an expression of understanding began to form on his face. Wow, he murmured. Peter, language, Victoria automatically reprimanded. Sorry, Mom, but wow. Peter jumped up from the armchair. You mean, Dad, that you? He pointed at Edward. That you cheated on Mom? Peter. Edward began. And Sarah, she's not just a maid here, right? She came to work here knowing you were the father of her daughter. It's more complicated than that, Edward said. Complicated. Peter began pacing the living room. Dad, wow. This is really crazy. Chloe, who had remained quiet during her brother's outburst, spoke softly. And Mom? How is Mom dealing with this? All eyes turned to Victoria, who took a deep breath before responding. I'm handling it the best way I can, Chloe. It was a surprise, of course. A painful surprise. But, Peter asked. But Lily is innocent. She's not to blame for the adult's mistakes. And if she's your sister, then she's part of our family. Peter stopped pacing and faced his mother. Mom, are you saying that Lily is going to live here? We haven't decided anything yet, son, Edward replied. We're all trying to figure out the best way to handle the situation. And Sarah? Chloe asked. Is she going to keep working here? We don't know that yet either. Peter sat on the edge of the coffee table, his expression shifting from shock to something resembling excitement. Wow, but thinking about it, I always wanted a younger sibling. It's a sister, Peter, Chloe corrected. Whatever. A little sister. And she's super cute. And smart. Peter looked at his parents. Did you see how quickly she learns? The other day I was teaching her to kick a ball, and she got it right on the first try. Edward felt a wave of affection for his son. Even in such a complex situation, Peter managed to find the positive aspects. Peter, Victoria said carefully, you understand that this changes a lot for our family, right? Changes how? Well, we'll have responsibilities for Lily. She will need care, education, attention. And you two will have to learn to share your parents' attention. Chloe spoke up for the first time since the serious conversation had begun. Mom, can I be honest? Of course, sweetheart. I kind of already knew. I mean, I suspected for weeks. And I don't know why, but it doesn't bother me. In fact, I kind of like the idea. Edward looked at his daughter in surprise. Yeah, Lily is adorable. And I've always wondered what it would be like. Clara smiled shyly. The other day I taught her how to make origami. She was so happy. Peter clapped his hands. See? Clara liked it too. This is going to be awesome. Peter, calm down, Victoria said. It's not that simple. Why not, Mom? Edward decided it was time to be more direct with his children. Because there are legal issues involved. Issues of paternity recognition, child support, rights. And there's also the question of how this will affect our relationship as a family. And there's also the social aspect, Victoria added. You will have to deal with comments at school, questions from friends. It won't be easy. Clara frowned. Mom, what kind of comments? Well, people will know that your father had a daughter out of wedlock. That can lead to gossip. And so what? Peter asked. Who cares what others think? You should care, Peter, Edward said. Our family reputation is important. My business depends on people's trust. Dad, Clara said, her voice gaining a firmness that surprised Edward. With all due respect, that's your problem. You made the mistake. Lily is not to blame for this. Clara is right, Peter agreed. And man, if anyone says anything about our sister, they will have to deal with me. Edward felt a mix of pride and concern about his children's reaction. On one hand, He was glad to see they were willing to accept Lily. On the other, he feared they did not fully understand the implications of the situation. "Kids," he said, "you need to understand that this is not a joke. If we officially recognize Lily as my daughter, our lives will change forever." "And what's the alternative?" Clara asked. "Pretend she doesn't exist?" The question silenced Edward. The truth was that since he found out about Lily, the idea of ignoring her had become unthinkable. At that moment, the living room door opened, and Sarah appeared carrying Lily in her arms. The little girl had a dirty face and was holding a yellow flower she had picked from the garden. "Excuse me," Sarah said, clearly uncomfortable realizing she had interrupted a serious conversation. "I just came to let you know that I'm going to give her a bath and then leave." "Sarah, wait." Victoria stood up. "I think it's time for you to join this conversation too." Sarah stood at the door, Lily playing distractedly with her hair. "I don't know if that's appropriate, Mrs. Johnson." "Sit here," Peter said, getting up and offering his armchair to Sarah. "You are part of this too." "Peter," Edward began, but Clara interrupted him. "Dad, he's right. Sarah is Lily's mother. She needs to be part of the decisions." Sarah cautiously sat down in the armchair, Lily still in her lap. The little girl looked curiously at all the people gathered, as if she knew something important was happening. "Sarah," Victoria said, "we told Peter and Clara about Lily's paternity." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. And now we need to decide what to do," Edward replied. Dad, Lily suddenly said, stretching her little arms toward Edward. Everyone in the room froze. It was the first time Lily had called Edward Dad, even if it was just the way all children her age referred to any adult man. Edward looked at Victoria, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Slowly, he approached Sarah and extended his arms. Lily practically jumped from her mother's lap to his, smiling and babbling something about the flower she was holding. "Look," she said, showing the flower to Edward. "Pretty, very pretty," Edward replied, his voice choked with emotion. Clara got up from the sofa and approached. "Can I?" she asked, extending her hands toward Lily. Lily looked at Clara and smiled, allowing herself to be passed to her older sister. "Hi, little one," Clara murmured. "Do you know that we are sisters?" "Sister," Lily repeated, clapping her hands. Peter joined the group. "And I am your big brother. I'm going to teach you how to play soccer properly." "Ball," Lily exclaimed, remembering their previous games. Edward looked around the room, his 3 children together for the first time, Victoria watching the scene with a complex, inscrutable expression, Sarah with tears in her eyes. "I think," he said slowly, "that our family just got bigger." Victoria approached the group and, to everyone's surprise, extended her arms toward Lily. "Can I?" Clara passed the little girl to Victoria, who held her carefully, as if she were holding something very fragile and precious. "Hi, Lily," Victoria said softly. "I'm Victoria. You can call me. Well, let's see what you want to call me." "Vicky," Lily said immediately, making everyone laugh. "Vicky is great," Victoria smiled, and Edward saw tears in her eyes. Sarah, who had been silently observing the whole scene, finally spoke. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for accepting her." "Sarah," Edward said, "there's a lot we need to discuss. About Lily's future, about your work here, about how we will structure all of this." "I know. But one thing I can guarantee right now," Edward continued, looking at each person in the room, "is that Lily is my daughter, and she will always have a place in our family, no matter how we organize the details." Peter started to clap, followed by Clara. Even Victoria smiled, though Edward knew there was still much to be resolved among them. Lily, at the center of all that attention, just smiled and babbled, completely unaware that she had just officially become part of a family that was reconfiguring around her. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over the lagoon, painting the sky in golden hues. It was the end of a day that would forever mark the beginning of a new family configuration, more complex, more challenging, but paradoxically, also more complete. June arrived with its cool mornings and sunny afternoons, bringing with it a new routine for the Turner mansion. 3 weeks had passed since the family revelation, and the house seemed to be in constant transformation, not just physically, but emotionally. Edward had arranged for a playground to be installed in the garden, an eco-friendly wooden slide, age-appropriate swings for Lily, and a miniature playhouse painted in vibrant colors. Mr. Edward, said Peter, the gardener, as he finished securing the special sand around the toys. It looks beautiful. The little girl will love it. Edward watched the work from the porch, sipping his morning coffee. It was Saturday, and for the first time in months, he had decided not to open his laptop or review reports. His attention was completely focused on the garden, where Peter was teaching Lily to kick a colorful plastic ball. That's it, Lily. Kick with your right foot now. Peter shouted excitedly as the girl ran after the ball with determined but uncoordinated steps. Ball! Ball! Lily shouted back, her crystal-clear laughter echoing through the garden. Chloe was sitting on the grass, weaving a crown of daisies she had picked from the flower bed. In recent days, she had proven to be an extremely dedicated big sister, inventing games, teaching new words, and even helping Sarah with basic care for the little one. Daddy! Lily suddenly shouted, abandoning the ball and running toward the porch with her little arms open. Edward felt that familiar pang in his chest, a mix of joy and responsibility that he was still learning to process. He quickly descended the steps and crouched down to receive Lily in his arms. Hi, Princess. Did you like the new toys? Play, she babbled, pointing at the slide. I play. Let's play then, Edward said, carrying her to the makeshift playground. From inside the house, Victoria watched the scene through the kitchen window while preparing a carrot cake, a recipe she had learned from Sarah in recent weeks. The relationship between the two women had initially been tense, but had gradually evolved into something resembling a cautious partnership. Mrs. Johnson, Sarah said, appearing in the kitchen with a basket of clean laundry, I need to talk to you about something. Victoria turned off the mixer and faced her. Go ahead, Sarah. It's about my schedule. I've been thinking that it might be better for me to work part-time. Why? Sarah hesitated, placing the basket on the counter. Because now that everyone knows the situation, I no longer need to bring Lily in secret. I can drop her off at daycare in the morning and work here in the afternoon, or vice versa. Victoria studied Sarah's face. In recent weeks, she had learned to read the young woman's expressions and sensed there was more behind this suggestion. Sarah, are you feeling uncomfortable here? It's not exactly discomfort. It's just, the situation is complicated for everyone, especially for you. Victoria turned off the oven and leaned against the counter. Sit here with me, Sarah. Let's talk properly. The two women sat on the stools at the kitchen island, the same spot where the truth had been revealed weeks earlier. Sarah, I'll be frank with you. At first, it was really hard. Very hard. Seeing you every day, knowing the whole story, it was like having an open wound being poked constantly. Sarah lowered her eyes. I understand. That's why I thought about reducing my hours. But, Victoria continued, in recent weeks, I've realized something. You love Lily more than anything in the world, and she needs stability. She does. And I've also realized that you are an excellent mother. The way you care for her, how you educate her with patience, how you protect her, it impresses me. Sarah looked up, surprised. Mrs. Johnson, let me finish. I've spent the last few weeks observing how you are with her, and also observing how she reacts to you. That little girl adores you. And more importantly, she needs you. She will always need me. Exactly. And if she is going to be part of our family, and she will, that has already been decided, then you are also part of it, in some way. Sarah blinked several times, as if she didn't fully understand. What I'm trying to say, Victoria continued, is that I want to propose something different. Instead of reducing your work hours, how about we increase your responsibilities? What do you mean? Lily will need education, specialized care, regular medical checkups. Edward has already mentioned hiring a professional nanny, but I think it would be better if you officially took on the role of her primary caregiver. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Mrs. Johnson, I don't have training in early childhood education, but you have something that no professional nanny will have. You are her mother. And besides, Victoria smiled, I can help you. We can learn together. You would do that? Sarah, let me tell you something you might not know. When Chloe was a baby, I felt completely lost. I didn't know how to deal with sleepless nights, colic, or fears. It was my mother-in-law who taught me everything. And you want to teach me? I want to help you give Lily everything she deserves. And she deserves a lot. From the garden, the joyful shouts of Lily reached them, who apparently had conquered the slide. The two women looked out the window and saw Edward holding the girl at the top of the slide while Peter and Chloe waited below to catch any falls. "Just look at this scene," Victoria murmured. "3 weeks ago, I would have never imagined seeing my husband playing on a slide with a 2-year-old. He's changed," Sarah observed. "Mr. Edward. He is more present." "More present how?" "With everyone. Just yesterday, I saw him talking to Peter about something school-related, and with Chloe about a book she's reading. Before, when I arrived here in the morning, he was already leaving for work. Now he stays more." Bianca reflected on this. It was true. Edward had drastically changed his routine in recent weeks. He arrived earlier, worked more from home, and seemed genuinely interested in participating in domestic life. "Maybe," Bianca said slowly, "Lily has brought more than just complications to our family." At that moment, Edward entered the kitchen carrying Lily, whose face was flushed from playing in the sun. "Bianca, do you have sunscreen for kids? I think she needs it. There's some in the bathroom drawer." "But Edward, we need to talk about some practical matters." "About what?" "About Lily's education. About how we're going to organize her care. About legal issues we haven't resolved yet." Edward sat on one of the stools, Lily in his lap, playing with the buttons of his polo shirt. "You're right. I've been avoiding thinking about the practical aspects because I was focused on, well, getting used to the idea of having another daughter." "And how are you feeling about that?" Bianca asked. Edward looked at Lily, who had discovered she could make shadows on the wall with her hands and was completely absorbed in this new discovery. "Scared," he admitted. "Scared and happy. It's a strange feeling. I feel like I've been given a second chance to be a father." "Second chance." "Bianca, I know I wasn't the best father to Peter and Chloe when they were little. I was always working, always traveling, always worried about business. I missed many important moments. You were building our financial stability. I was using work as an excuse to avoid the emotional responsibility of being a father," Edward corrected. "But with Lily, I don't know. I want to do it differently." Sarah, who had remained quiet throughout the conversation, spoke softly. "Mr. Edward, may I ask a question?" "Of course. What do you plan to do about legal recognition? About giving her your last name?" The question hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. Edward and Bianca exchanged glances. It was a question they had both avoided addressing directly. We haven't fully discussed this," Edward admitted. "But it's important," Sarah insisted. "For her future. For school, health insurance, inheritance. All those things depend on legal recognition." "You're right," Bianca said. "Edward, we need to resolve this." Edward adjusted Lily in his lap. The little girl had grown tired of the shadows on the wall and was now almost dozing off, lulled by the warmth and the gentle motion of her father's arms. "I want to officially recognize her," he finally said. "I want her to have my last name. I want her to have all the rights of a daughter." But, Sarah asked, "But this will make everything public. It will have to go to the registry office. It will generate documents, and eventually people will know. And what's the problem with that?" Bianca asked, surprising both Edward and Sarah. Bianca, "No, Edward. What's the problem with people knowing you have a daughter? Are you ashamed of her?" "Of course not. But don't you care about the comments? About the gossip?" Bianca looked at Lily, who had completely fallen asleep in Edward's arms. The little girl had an expression of absolute peace, completely confident and secure. "Edward," Bianca said softly, "3 weeks ago I was willing to destroy our marriage over this situation. Today, looking at her sleeping in your arms, all I can think is that she needs to have her place in the world." "Are you sure?" "I am. And you know what? Let the gossip come. Let the comments come. Anyone who has a problem with Lily's existence will have to explain themselves to me." Edward smiled, the first genuine smile Bianca had seen on his face in weeks. "Then let's go to the registry office on Monday," he said. "Let's go to the registry office on Monday," Bianca confirmed. Sarah got up from the stool with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you very much." From the garden, the voices of Peter and Chloe reached them as they continued to play outside. The sound of laughter mingled with the aroma of carrot cake in the oven and the golden light of the afternoon streaming through the windows. The Turner family was definitely reconfiguring itself, and for the first time since the whole situation had begun, Edward felt that maybe, just maybe, everything would turn out all right. Monday arrived filled with anticipation and nervousness. Edward had spent the weekend organizing all the necessary documents for the official recognition of paternity, while Bianca researched online about the legal procedures and the practical implications of the situation. The law firm that handled the family's business had been discreetly consulted, and everything was prepared for the visit to the registry office. "Mr. Edward," said Roberto, his assistant, over the speakerphone while Edward drove his luxury sedan towards downtown. "Dr. Smith confirmed he will meet you at the registry office at 2 in the afternoon. He said he brought all the necessary forms." "Perfect, Roberto. Cancel all my meetings this afternoon." "And Roberto?" "Yes, sir. This is strictly confidential." "Of course, Mr. Edward. You can count on me." In the passenger seat, Sarah nervously adjusted the elegant navy dress that Bianca had insisted she wear. For the occasion, Bianca had said that morning, also lending her a pair of flats and a leather handbag. It was the first time Sarah had worn such elegant clothes, and she felt out of place, as if she were in a costume. "Relax, Sarah," Edward said, noticing her tension. "It's just paperwork." "It's not just paperwork, Mr. Edward. It's my daughter's future." In the back seat, Lily was strapped into a new car seat, an imported model that Edward had bought on Saturday, along with a series of other items he deemed necessary for their daughter's safety. The little girl was playing with a colorful picture book, pointing at the animals and trying to imitate their sounds. "Woof woof," she shouted, pointing at the picture of a dog. "That's right, Lily. Dogs say woof woof," Edward responded, looking in the rearview mirror. It was surreal for him. 3 months earlier, his biggest concern was deciding between 2 investment proposals for a new venture in Malibu. Now he was heading to the courthouse to acknowledge a daughter whose existence he had discovered by chance. The Civil Registry office in Beverly Hills was an old but well-maintained building, with its walls adorned with Portuguese tiles and the constant flow of people dealing with the official milestones of their lives: births, marriages, deaths. Edward parked the car and observed the activity for a moment. "Ready?" he asked Sarah. "Ready," she replied, taking a deep breath. Dr. Smith, the family lawyer, was waiting for them at the entrance. He was an elegant 60-year-old man with completely white hair and an impeccable suit. He had handled Edward's legal affairs for over a decade, and his professional demeanor revealed no judgment about the situation. "Edward," he greeted with a firm handshake. "Sarah," he nodded politely. "And this must be little Lily." "Hi," Lily said cheerfully, waving at the lawyer. "Very charming," Dr. Smith smiled. "Well, let's get this sorted out as efficiently as possible." The process was simpler than Edward had imagined. Sitting in front of an efficient public servant named Ms. Johnson, they filled out forms, presented documents, and confirmed information. Lily, initially curious about the new environment, soon grew tired and began to fidget. "Mommy, let's go," she complained, tugging at Sarah's skirt. "Calm down, sweetheart, we're almost done," Sarah murmured, trying to distract her with a stuffed toy. "Mr. Edward," said Ms. Johnson, "do you confirm that you wish to acknowledge the paternity of Lily Smith and include her in your last name?" "I confirm." "And you, Sarah, do you agree with the acknowledgement and authorize the change of the record?" "I agree." "Very well. In approximately 10 business days, you will be able to pick up the new birth certificate. Lily Smith will become Lily Smith Turner." Edward felt a shiver at hearing his daughter's full name. Lily Turner. It was official now. As they left the courthouse, Dr. Smith accompanied them to the parking lot. "Edward," he said privately, while Sarah was securing Lily in her car seat, "I need to talk to you about some legal implications." "What kind of implications?" "Inheritance issues, mainly. With the official acknowledgement, Lily will have the same inheritance rights as Peter and Chloe. You need to update your will." Edward had thought about this, but hearing the lawyer's words made it all more real. "And there's also the matter of child support," Dr. Smith continued. "Technically, you are obligated to provide for Lily until she turns 18, or 24 if she is studying. That's not a problem. I know it's not a financial issue, but it's important to formalize everything. How much do you intend to contribute monthly?" Edward looked at the car, where Sarah was humming a song to calm Lily. "Doctor, can I ask you a question?" "Of course. In your experience with similar cases, what would be an appropriate amount?" "Fair." Dr. Smith thought for a moment. "Considering your standard of living, I would say something between $5,000 and $10,000 a month would be appropriate." plus a private health plan and education. And if I want to do more than that? What do you mean? What if I want to open a savings account for her future? An account that accumulates money for when she goes to college or wants to start her own business. Dr. Smith smiled. That would be very commendable, Edward. How much are you talking about? Edward thought quickly. His investments were doing well, and the business was thriving. How about $100,000 a year? In an investment that she can only access when she turns 18. That's a generous amount. She is my daughter, Edward said simply. She deserves the same opportunities as Peter and Chloe. 2 hours later, back at the Turner mansion, Edward found a scene that made him stop at the door of the living room. Victoria was on the floor, playing with building blocks with Lily, while Chloe was doing homework at the coffee table. Peter was sprawled on the sofa, watching TV, but clearly paying attention to the three's play. Tower. Lily shouted every time she managed to stack 2 blocks. Very good. Now let's make an even bigger tower. Victoria encouraged, stacking more blocks. How did it go? Chloe asked, looking up from her books. All good, Edward replied, sitting on the sofa next to Peter. In 10 days, she will officially be Lily Turner. Lily Turner, Peter repeated, testing the sound. Sounds nice. It does, Chloe agreed. Sarah entered the room carrying a tray with juice and homemade cookies. She had changed out of her elegant dress into her usual work attire, but Edward noticed she seemed more relaxed than in the morning. Mr. Edward, she said, can I talk to you for a moment? Of course. They stepped aside to a corner of the room while Lily remained engrossed in play with Victoria. I wanted to thank you, Sarah said softly, for everything you did today, and for everything Mrs. Johnson has been doing as well. Sarah, you don't need to thank me. It's my obligation. It's not just an obligation. You could have done all this in a cold, bureaucratic way, but you didn't. You were treating Lily like a real daughter. Edward looked at his daughter, who had abandoned the blocks and was now trying to comb Victoria's hair with her tiny hands. Because she is my real daughter. And I wanted to talk about something, Sarah continued. About my work here. Edward felt a knot in his stomach. Do you want to leave? No, that's not it. It's just that, now that the situation has changed, I wanted to propose something different. What do you have in mind? Mrs. Johnson offered me a new arrangement. Instead of working as a general housekeeper, I would become, how can I say it, Lily's primary caregiver, with responsibilities for education, health, and development. And would you be willing to do that? I would, but I wanted to make sure that you also agree. It's a good idea. Edward thought for a moment. In fact, the proposal made total sense. Who better than the child's own mother to care for Lily in a dedicated way? Sarah, this sounds perfect. And I'd like to add something else. What? I want you to live here. Sarah blinked several times. Live here. Here in the house. There's a guest room we don't use, near the service area. We can renovate it, create a suitable space for you and Lily. With a private bathroom, a small living area. Mr. Edward. Think about it, Sarah. This way, Lily would have total stability. She'd be close to me, close to her siblings, but with you always nearby. And you wouldn't have to worry about rent, transportation, those things. Sarah was silent for a long moment, looking at Lily, who was now sitting on Chloe's lap, flipping through a picture book. Can I think about it? Of course. No pressure. But Sarah? Yes. You're part of this family now. I want you to feel at home here. That night, after Lily had been put to sleep in the makeshift crib in Sarah's room, the family gathered in the living room for a discussion. So, Peter said, how does this work now? Is Lily going to live here? Where will she go to school? What will she call us? Calm down, Peter, Victoria laughed. One thing at a time. But those are valid questions, Chloe noted. Especially about school. Is she old enough for daycare? Edward leaned back in his favorite armchair. Well, she turns 3 in December. She can start early childhood education next year. And where will she study? Peter insisted. Where you all studied at that age, Victoria replied. At St. Benedict's Academy. Wow, that's crazy. Peter exclaimed. Our sister is going to study at the same school we did. And she'll have to wear a uniform and participate in the spring festivals and the end-of-year celebrations, Chloe added, visibly excited about the prospect. Edward watched his older children's enthusiasm with a mix of joy and apprehension. On one hand, he was happy to see how naturally they had accepted Lily. On the other, he was beginning to understand the magnitude of the changes that were coming. And what about Sarah? Chloe asked. Is she really going to live here? If she wants to, Victoria replied. I think it would be the best arrangement for everyone. I think she should stay, Peter said. Lily gets super happy when she's with her mom. And Sarah is a good person. Yeah, Chloe agreed. And she cooks better than Aunt Marissa. Everyone laughed. Aunt Marissa, Victoria's sister, was famous in the family for her culinary disasters. Well, Edward said, it seems we've reached a consensus. I'll talk to an architect tomorrow about renovating the guest room. And I'll also arrange for Lily's enrollment for next year. And the health insurance? Victoria reminded. It's already being arranged. Peter stretched out on the couch. Man, this is so crazy. 3 months ago, we were a family of 4. Now we're 6. 5.5, Chloe corrected. Lily is still little. 5.5 then, Peter agreed, laughing. Edward looked around the room. At Victoria, who finally seemed relaxed, at Peter and Chloe, who were animatedly discussing how it would be to teach Lily to ride a bike, at the staircase leading to the room where his youngest daughter was sleeping peacefully. 3 months ago, he considered himself a successful man, but emotionally disconnected from his own family. Today, watching this new family configuration, he felt that he might have found something he didn't even know he was looking for. A second chance to be not just a provider, but a real father. And for the first time in a long time, Edward Turner felt truly at home. September arrived with a torrential rain that lasted 3 consecutive days, as if the sky were washing the city for a new beginning. The renovation of Sarah's room had been completed the previous week, transforming the old guest room into a cozy little apartment. A master bedroom with a queen bed, a mini children's room decorated with an enchanted garden theme for Lily, a compact living area, and a full bathroom. Edward had insisted on every detail, from the laminate flooring to the quiet air conditioning. It looks beautiful, Mr. Edward, Sarah said on moving day, carrying her few boxes into the new space. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Sarah. It's the least I can do. Lily, now 2.5 years old, was running around the new room shouting, my room, and pointing at everything with excitement. The small bed with a white canopy, the low shelves filled with new books, the rocking horse Edward had bought the previous Saturday. The adjustment, however, had not been as smooth as Edward had hoped. The first major turbulence happened on a Thursday night, when Victoria received a call from her friend Helen from the club. Victoria, dear, Helen said, her voice laden with that false concern characteristic of gossip among the elite of Los Angeles. I didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, but people are talking. Edward, who was in the office reviewing contracts, could only hear fragments of the conversation, but Bianca's tense tone alerted him. Saying that Edward has a child out of wedlock, that the child is living in your house. Some people think you're very naive for accepting the situation. The call lasted 20 minutes, and when Victoria finally hung up, Edward found her in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she prepared tea. The gossip has already started, she said bluntly. What are they saying? Everything. That you've cheated on me multiple times. That Sarah is your mistress. That I'm pretending to accept the situation to preserve appearances. That Lily might not really be your daughter. Edward felt anger rising like volcanic lava. Who is spreading these lies? Does it matter? The important thing is that our life. That night, lying on opposite sides of the king-size bed, the couple faced their first major argument since the situation had stabilized. Edward, Victoria said in the dark, I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Go ahead and ask. Have there been other women? Besides Sarah? Edward was silent for so long that Victoria thought he had fallen asleep. Edward. No, he finally replied. Just Sarah. And it was that one time I told you about. Really, I swear on our children's lives. Victoria sighed. Okay, I believe you. Victoria, do you want me to talk to some people? To try to control the comments? No, that would just make things worse. Let's let the dust settle on its own. But the dust didn't settle on its own. The following week, Peter came home visibly upset after a tennis practice at the local club. Dad, he said, throwing his racket on the living room floor, I need to talk to you. Edward was playing in the garden with Lily, teaching her to recognize different types of leaves. The girl had developed a fascination with plants and spent hours collecting petals, and leaves for her treasures. Leaf, Lily exclaimed, showing a hibiscus leaf to Edward. That's right, princess. What color is this leaf? Green. And what do we have here on the edge? Finger, she said, running her little finger along the leaf serrations. Peter, Edward said, not taking his eyes off Lily. What's wrong? Thomas asked me if it was true that you had a bastard daughter. Edward froze. He actually said that? He did, in front of everyone. And when I told him it was none of his business, he said everyone at the club is talking about it. Edward took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. And what did you say? That he was a jerk and that if he said anything about our family again, I would punch him in the face. Peter, Dad, I don't care what people think. Lily is our sister, end of story. But it's annoying to keep hearing stupid comments. Lily, sensing the tension in the conversation, dropped the leaves and approached Peter. Brother sad? She asked, placing her little hand on his knee. Peter picked her up. No, Lily. Brother is not sad. Brother is mad at silly people. Silly not. Lily said seriously, making Peter laugh despite his annoyance. That night, during dinner, Chloe brought her own version of the situation. Mom, she said, absent-mindedly poking at the grilled salmon that Sarah had prepared. My literature teacher called me in to talk today. About what? Victoria asked. About my family situation. She said if I wanted to talk about anything, she would be available. Edward dropped his fork. She really said that. She did. And the worst part is that she said it in a pitying tone, as if I were a victim of some tragedy. And what did you say? That my family situation was great, thanks. That I had gained a wonderful sister and that I was very happy about it. Victoria smiled. And how did she react? She was taken aback. I think she expected me to cry or complain about Dad. Edward looked at his two older children. Peter, with his 16 years and wounded pride for having to defend the family at school, and Chloe, with her 14 years and an emotional maturity that constantly surprised him. Kids, he said, I'm sorry that you have to deal with this because of my mistakes. Dad, Peter interrupted, stop apologizing. We've already told you it's no problem. Peter is right, Chloe agreed. People talk because they have nothing better to do. And honestly, I'd rather have an imperfect family full of love than a perfect and cold family like the Andersons. The Andersons were a well-known family in the Turners' social circle, famous for their impeccable elegance and complete lack of affection among their members. 2 weeks later, the situation reached a peak when Edward received an unexpected call at the office. Mr. Edward, said the female voice on the other end of the line. This is Amanda Smith from the Daily News. I would like to ask you a few questions about your family. Edward felt a chill in his stomach. What kind of questions? About your youngest daughter, about the changes in the family structure, about how your wife is coping with the situation. No comments, Edward said quickly. Mr. Edward, this would be an opportunity to clarify the facts, to tell your side of the story. I said no comments. Edward hung up the phone with trembling hands. Gossip at the club was one thing. The press taking an interest in the story was something completely different. That night, he called an emergency family meeting in the living room. Even Sarah was invited to participate, as the situation affected her directly. Everyone, Edward began. Things are getting more serious. The press is trying to turn our private situation into news. The press? Victoria asked, alarmed. A newspaper called me today wanting to do a story. And what did you say? Peter wanted to know. That there were no comments. But that might not be enough. Sarah, who had been sitting discreetly in a chair in the corner of the room, spoke for the first time. Mr. Edward, if necessary, I can leave. Take Lily away until things calm down. No. Peter and Chloe shouted simultaneously, startling Lily, who was playing on the rug with wooden blocks. Sarah, Victoria said firmly, you are not going anywhere. This is your home now. But if our presence is causing problems. The problems are not caused by your presence, Edward interrupted. They are caused by malicious people who don't know how to mind their own business. Lily, who had stopped playing to observe the adults' conversation, got up and walked over to Edward. Daddy sad? She asked, climbing onto his lap. No, princess. Daddy is just worried. Lily, be gentle, Lily said, awkwardly but lovingly stroking Edward's face with her little hands. The scene completely disarmed the tension in the room. Edward held his daughter closer. breathing in the scent of children's shampoo in her hair. "You know what?" he said, looking at everyone in the room. "To hell with what other people think. This is our family. We decide how it works." "That's right, Dad," Peter exclaimed. "And if someone doesn't like it," Chloe added, "that's their problem." Victoria got up from the sofa and approached Edward and Lily. "You know what I've noticed in the past few weeks?" "What?" Edward asked. "That our family is closer now than it was before this whole situation started." It was true. In recent months, Edward had been more involved in domestic life than he had been in years. Peter and Chloe were talking more openly with their parents, and Lily had brought a lightness and joy that the house hadn't had in a long time. "So it's decided," Edward said. "We won't hide. We won't apologize. We'll live our lives normally and let people say what they want." "And what if the press insists?" Sarah asked. "Then we go on a talk show and tell our side," Peter joked. Can you imagine the look on the host's face interviewing Lily? Everyone laughed, and Lily, even without understanding the joke, clapped happily. That night, after everyone went to bed, Edward and Victoria were alone on the porch, watching the moonlit lagoon. "Edward," Victoria said, "can I confess something to you?" "Of course." "At first, I was angry. Very angry. I felt like you had destroyed our perfect life. And now I realize our life wasn't that perfect. It was empty, mechanical." Edward held his wife's hand. "And how is it now?" "Now it's complicated, messy, difficult." Victoria smiled. "But it's full of life. And I prefer a complicated but real life to a perfect but empty one." "I love you," Edward said simply. "I know. And I love you too. Despite everything. Or maybe because of everything." They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sound of the waves in the lagoon and the distant hum of traffic in Malibu. "Edward, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay." And for the first time since the whole situation began, Edward truly believed that yes, they were going to be okay. Not as the perfect family they pretended to be before, but as the real, imperfect, and loving family they had become. December arrived in Los Angeles with that typical humid heat of summer, bringing with it the scent of approaching rain and the excitement of year-end festivities. The Turner mansion was buzzing with activity, not only for the Christmas preparations, but mainly because Lily would turn 3 on the 15th, and the family had decided to throw the little girl her first big birthday party. "Dad, look!" Lily shouted from the garden, running toward the porch where Edward was having his morning coffee. In recent months, her speech had evolved dramatically, and now she could form complete sentences, although still with the characteristic pronunciation of a nearly 3-year-old. "What is it, princess?" "Blue butterfly. I saw it," she exclaimed, pointing to the garden where a blue butterfly was fluttering among the flowers. Edward went down the steps and knelt beside his daughter. "Where is it?" There, Lily whispered, as if afraid of scaring the butterfly away. Together, they watched the delicate insect land on the yellow petals of the flower. Edward held Lily's small hand, feeling the softness of her skin and the absolute trust she had in him. "She's beautiful, isn't she, Dad?" "Very beautiful. Just like you." Lily laughed, that crystal-clear sound that had become the soundtrack of the house. "I'm not a butterfly." "No? Then what are you?" "I'm Lily Turner," she declared proudly, emphasizing each syllable of her last name as Sarah had taught her. Edward's heart tightened. In 9 months, that little girl had become the gravitational center of the family, and he could no longer imagine his life without her. "Dad," Peter's voice echoed from the living room. "Come here. You need to see this." Edward picked up Lily and went inside the house. In the living room, the whole family was gathered around the television, watching the morning show. The touching story of a family from Beverly Hills that redefined the concept of unconditional love, said the host. Edward Turner, a businessman in the construction industry, publicly acknowledged his daughter Lily, nearly 3 years old, and the entire family embraced the girl as a gift. Edward felt his legs weaken. "How?" "Apparently," Victoria explained, not taking her eyes off the television. "Someone sent the show's production photos of our children's school festival. Photos where we all appeared together, including Lily. On the screen, images from the St. Benedict School Summer Festival appeared, where Peter and Chloe studied." Edward remembered that day. Lily had insisted on wearing a folk dance dress that Sarah had specially sewn for her, and the whole family had participated in the dance. The photos showed genuine moments, Edward teaching Lily to dance, Victoria fixing the bow in the girl's hair, Peter and Chloe protecting her from the movement of the other dancers. Far from the typical scandals of the Beverly Hills elite, the Turner family demonstrates that true love overcomes any prejudice, continued the host. Little Lily, according to sources close to the family, was welcomed not only by her father but by the entire family, including Edward's wife and the couple's two older children. Who sent those photos? Edward asked. We don't know, Chloe replied. But just look at the comments on the website. She showed the tablet where hundreds of comments appeared in real time. What a beautiful family. This is what true love looks like. True love. His wife is a perfect example of a woman. What a huge heart. That girl is a doll. And how lucky to have a family like that. Finally, a story with a happy ending in the news. Edward sat heavily on the sofa, Lily still in his lap. The exposure he had feared had happened, but in a completely different way than he had expected. Dad, Peter said, I think this is good. How is this good? Look, the report is showing the positive side of the story. It's not a scandal, it's, I don't know, inspiration. Sarah, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke up. Mr. Edward, can I say something? Of course, Sarah. I know you didn't want this exposure, but maybe it's better this way. Now everyone knows the truth. No more gossip, no more speculation. It's just our story, the way it really is. Victoria approached and sat next to Edward. She's right. And look at the comments. People are reacting positively. Mommy, Lily suddenly said, turning to Victoria, am I going to be on TV? It was the first time Lily had called Victoria mommy. In recent months, she had used Vicky, but never the maternal term. Victoria felt tears in her eyes. No, my love. You won't be on TV. It's just a story about our family. Our family is big. Lily exclaimed, counting on her fingers. There's Daddy, there's Mommy Vicky, there's Brother Peter, there's Sister Chloe, there's Mommy Sarah, and there's me. Yes, Edward said, his voice choked with emotion. Our family is really big. Edward's phone rang insistently throughout the morning. Journalists, friends, acquaintances, everyone wanted to comment on the report. But it was a specific call that moved him the most. Edward. It was the voice of his sister Mary, who lived in New York and with whom he had sporadic contact. Mary, did you see? I did. Edward, I'm crying here at the office. What a beautiful story. Thank you, Mary. Edward, can I tell you something? In recent years, when we talked on the phone, you always seemed empty, distant. But today, in the report, in the photos, you look truly happy. Edward looked around the room, where his family was scattered. Victoria organizing papers for Lily's birthday party. Peter teaching his younger sister to play video games. Chloe showing Sarah a book she had bought for Lily. I am happy, Mary. I am really happy. When can I meet Lily? Whenever you want. Our home is always open to family. In the afternoon, while Lily napped in her room, Edward found Victoria on the porch, reading a book about child development. Studying, he asked, sitting beside her, trying to understand how to deal with a 3-year-old. It's different from when Peter and Chloe were little. Different how? More aware, I think. When the boys were little, I kind of did it on autopilot. Now, with Lily, I want to do everything right. I want to make up for lost time. Edward held his wife's hand. Victoria, you have been an amazing mother to her. Mother, Victoria repeated the word thoughtfully. It's strange, isn't it? She calls me mommy, but there's Sarah, who is her biological mother. And does that bother you? At first, it did. But now, I think a child has room in their heart for a lot of love. And maybe it's better this way. She has Sarah, who loves her unconditionally, and she has me, who is learning to love her too. And there's the father, who adores her, and 2 older siblings who would give their lives for her. That's true. She is a very lucky girl. At that moment, Lily appeared on the porch, her hair messy from sleeping and holding the stuffed animal that Edward had bought for her. Is your nap over? Victoria asked, opening her arms. Lily snuggled into Victoria's lap, still a bit sleepy. Mommy Vicky, when is my party? The day after tomorrow, princess. Will there be cake? There will be cake, balloons, music, and all your friends. And presents. Edward laughed. You can be sure there will be presents. And will Peter sing happy birthday? Peter, Chloe, Everyone will sing happy birthday to you. Lily smiled contentedly and closed her eyes again, rocked by Victoria's gentle movement. Edward, Victoria said softly, can I confess something to you? Sure. When I found out about Lily, I thought our family was destroyed. But looking at her now, at how we've all changed, I think our family was waiting for her. What do you mean? I think she brought something that was missing here. A lightness, a spontaneity. The boys are closer to us. You are more present. I am. I don't know, more human. Edward watched their daughter sleeping in Victoria's lap, her rosy cheeks, and the calm breath of someone who feels completely safe. Do you think we really did it? Created a real family. Edward, look around us. Peter, who put down the video game to play with his sister. Chloe, who is planning to read stories to Lily every night. Sarah, who found a place where she can raise her daughter with dignity and love. And us, too, who learned that love is not something perfect, but something we build every day. And Lily, Victoria smiled, kissing the girl's forehead, brought all of this to us. She taught us that family is not about perfection. It's about acceptance, about choosing to love even when it's hard, about building something beautiful even when the beginning was complicated. The sun began to set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. From the garden came the aroma of the flowers that Sarah lovingly tended, mixed with the smell of dinner she was preparing in the kitchen. Edward, Victoria said, do you regret anything? Edward thought for a long moment. Did he regret the betrayal? Yes. Did he regret hurting Victoria? Absolutely. But did he regret Lily's existence? I regret the way things happened, he finally replied. But I don't regret the outcome. I can't imagine our life without her. Neither can I, Victoria agreed. That night, during dinner, Peter made an unexpected announcement. Everyone, he said, tapping his fork on his glass as if to make a toast, I have something to say. What is it? Chloe asked. I was thinking, and I believe we should create a family photo album. Like, a complete album, with pictures of everyone, telling our story. What a lovely idea, Victoria exclaimed. And I wanted to have pictures of Lily since she was little. Sarah must have plenty saved. Sarah smiled. I do. I have pictures of her since she was born. And we can create a timeline of our family. Before Lily and after Lily. Chloe clapped her hands. Let's do it. It can be my summer project. Edward watched his children excitedly planning while Lily tried to eat her sweet potato puree by herself, making an adorable mess. Daddy, Lily suddenly said, do you love our family? Edward stopped eating and looked at her. I love our family, Princess. Very much. Me too, she declared solemnly. Our family is the best in the world. And at that moment, surrounded by the people he loved most in the world, Edward Turner knew he had finally found what he had spent his entire life searching for. Not the perfect success he had always chased, but the imperfect and wonderful mess that is a true family. Outside, the Los Angeles night settled over the lake, and inside the Turner mansion, a family that had rebuilt itself through love, acceptance, and the courage to start anew celebrated another day together. On December 15th, Lily Turner would turn 3, surrounded by a family that had chosen her, protected her, and loved her from the very first moment. And Edward knew this was just the beginning of a new story, one he was determined to write completely differently than the first time. A story where love would conquer any adversity, where family would be built not on perfection, but on truth, and where a little girl with green eyes would forever be living proof that the best gifts in life sometimes come unexpectedly, but always at the right time. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and if you watched until here, comment, I watched until here, and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's going to be very exciting.